Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out the radio version of the show every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on WDJY 99.1 in Atlanta. We also air on a podcasting network in Los Angeles called the 405 Media. There's a TV version of the show that airs on KMVT 15 in Silicon Valley at 8 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday nights. Both versions of the show air in other states. For these show times, plus past episodes, please visit the show's website at buildingthefutureshow.com. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com. Join me at the 10th Annual Media Excellence Awards on January 18th in Beverly Hills, California. The attendees and I will be celebrating innovation and leadership in technology and entertainment. There are 20 award categories with 1,000 nominees. These awards honor those who are creating groundbreaking technology to better our lives and celebrate the hard work, determination, and brilliance in the leadership within the companies which create the new world we live in today. I will be recording nominees and winners at the awards. For tickets and more information, go to MediaXAwards.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have John P. Roberts. He's the Chief Content Officer at Pure Imagination Studios. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you've done and are currently doing is actually really cool. And kind of selfishly, I like talking to people like yourself that have kind of done stuff that I've kind of admired over the years. But maybe before we kind of get into all that fun stuff, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure. I grew up in Rochester, New York.
Okay.
Right near in between Buffalo and Syracuse, just across the lake from Toronto. And I was, as a kid, just always kind of lucky. I was there for a lot of firsts. I remember like being on a street and getting the first Atari and playing Pong and always looking at that type of stuff. So, and always obsessed with television and entertainment, and but never in a million years thought that I would ever be able to work in that industry, especially when Rochester was known more for Kodak and Xerox. So you're either going to be an engineer or some type of business guy, but entertainment was never even a thought until I went to college.
Okay, so what did you take in college, and why did you decide to take it?
So I literally was going to be a business major, because like I said, I didn't know of anything else. So I was accepted to State University of New York at Fredonia, and was taking all my business classes, my economics, accounting, and accounting was like my albatross around my neck. And I remember finally taking accounting 2 and just, walking across campus, like just depressed, like this was going to be my life. And I literally, at that moment, I literally saw a guy that had a film camera and he was doing something. And I just remember like a moth to a flame. I walked over to him like, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" And he looked at me like, "Oh, I'm doing a project for my film class." I'm like, "You can take a class in film?" He's like, "Yeah, actually you can major in it as well. We have a whole television and film track, and we actually have a student-run television station." And I mean, literally the clouds were parting and the sun was starting to come down. And I that night I actually went to they had this campus center where you could sign up for all these different activities, and I joined the television station. And within 2 weeks I had changed my major and never looked back.
That's amazing, man. I love those stories of just, not that you like fell into it, but like you didn't even really realize there was like an industry, in your area that you could kind of get into. I think that's great.
Yeah, it was crazy. And literally after that, I literally went from like thinking like college was just something you had to do as part of the step to like, and what was crazy was because it was like my second semester sophomore year, there was like, I'm going to probably have to do the 5-year program, but I was loving it so much. I was taking 21 credit hours a semester and graduated in time with a 4.0 because I was that passionate about it. And literally graduated, and a month later, I drove across the country to Los Angeles and never looked back.
So, okay, no, were you going to a job when you drove to LA, or you were just like, I got to go to LA and get a job?
That's exactly right. I mean, so the funny part was, at Fredonia, I had produced, a couple of student-run shows. There was a comedy show that I produced, and here I'm thinking like I'm like, all that. So I had all my VHS tapes ready to show people in LA, and I got there and I knew one guy, and I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with 3 roommates. So I slept on the floor for about 6 months, and I just started knocking on every door. I went to Paramount to Disney to Fox and realized like, oh, that's not how it works. So I ended up getting a job just as a runner, production assistant at a small film company called Howard International Films. And they were like kind of the B movies. Like the one was, I remember seeing the poster on the wall, Angel, Hollywood Hooker by Night, Honor School Student by Day, It's Her Story. And I'm like, hey, I saw it on HBO, so this guy's the real deal. And like he also did like A Man Called Horse with Richard Harris. And, you know, I remembered these titles. So I'm like, okay, this guy's legit. And, you know, that was the first year of my life, was just, you know, delivering scripts, buying groceries, and just, you know, doing whatever I was told, working 6-7 days a week, and loved every second of it. I couldn't afford to do much. I couldn't afford to go out on a date or really do anything else but work. But I loved every second of it because I was in Los Angeles doing something I was really passionate about.
Sure. So you've been in kind of the entertainment space for a long time now. Can you walk us through kind of your career and maybe some career highlights up until what you're doing today?
Yeah, and I'll tell you some of like these game changer moments. So I left the film company, and then I was kind of out there looking for the right gig. I'd gone back to New York for a break, and this is the crazy part. On the flight back, our flight was delayed, and I was flying out of JFK.
Okay. And
I remember there was, and this is a really important, you know, story because it's changed everything. There was a woman there, and she must have had a 4-year-old that was completely out of control because he just kept on running around, and all she would ever say was, "Zachary, stop! Zachary, stop!" Like I think everybody in the airport wanted to kill Zachary. And we landed in LA. 2 days later, I was invited to some dinner party. I go there and I meet some people, and there's a little kid there and a woman, and the kid starts running around, and Shelton, this woman goes, "Zachary, stop!" I'm like, "Excuse me, were you on a plane 2 days ago?" And she's like, "You recognize me because of my son." I'm like, "I think we all did." And she started laughing, and she turned out to be an executive vice president over at Fox.
Okay.
And we became friends. And 2 weeks later, she called me and said, "You know, there's an opening over at Fox. You should consider it." And that changed my life. That because of that plane ride and because I met her, I got a job at Fox. You know, it was literally working in legal affairs, which was like, okay, not sexy at all, but it was like I figured if I could just land at Fox, I could, you know, blaze my own path. If I could just prove that I belong there. And, you know, within the 6 months to 9 months, I'd moved from legal affairs over to 20th Television. And 20th Television was, you know, kind of a part of the production arm of Fox, in which they would produce shows that they would sell to Fox Broadcasting or they would sell to other networks.
Okay. So
they did everything from The Simpsons to Ticket Fences. They owned a whole library of shows like, you know, Batman with, you know, the Adam West Batman series with MASH, Dynasty, all this library that they would sell to other cable networks. So I was working for this woman that was in charge of that. And within a year of that, now we're talking around 94, Rupert Murdoch decided he wanted to launch a cable network called FX.
Right.
And we're all like, well, what's that going to be? So I thought that might be a cool opportunity. And I said, I'd like to go over to FX. And I was, you know, I signed on as one of the marketing guys, and we started branding the channel, what it was going to look like. And when FX launched, it was a great little channel. It was a little on the cheesy side because, you know, people like, you know, the amazing Tom Bergeron was the host of a morning show called Breakfast Time. And his co-host was this great woman named Lori, but there's also Bob the Puppet. I mean, we had like all this live programming, like the pet department, the collectibles show. And, you know, it was like this very kind of campy, fun little network, but it was not what FX is today, which is like, you know, and when I left FX to go to Fox Broadcasting, I was like, oh, I'm going from like the farm team to the major leagues, whereas now it's kind of in reverse, where FX is doing the most cutting edge stuff compared to, you know, what Fox has been doing. But they're both, you know, great. But at FX is where kind of everything changed for me, because not only was Rupert Murdoch trying to get into the cable business, but he had just bought an online company called Delphi.
Oh, sure.
And do you remember Delphi?
Yeah.
Delphi it was like the non-sexy version of Prodigy and AOL. It was a text-based service.
Yeah.
And you had your plug-in, your 2400 modem, and if you wanted to play poker, you're like getting it all 8H QD, which is 8 of hearts, Queen of diamonds. And a buddy of mine was like putting all the bets on it. He's like, dude, this is the future. He's like, you really should get to know what Delphi is doing. So at one of the cable shows, I volunteered to man the booth and show people how Delphi and FX were going to work together.
Okay.
So I've been doing the demos all day long, started to shut down the computer, and I looked down the hallway, and literally Rupert Murdoch is walking down the hall to check out the FX booth. And at the time, Ann Sweeney was the president of FX. So I got everything set up just in case, and I'm just kind of standing there, and all of a sudden, Mr. Murdoch walks up to me and goes, "Say, what do we have here?" In his nice Australian accent. And I literally just went into just demo mode, and I was very excited, and I kind of kept it together. And, at one point he said, "So tell me the difference between how you see Prodigy and Delphi." I go, "Well, Mr. Murdoch," I go, Prodigy's owned by Sears, and quite frankly, it looks like it. And although Delphi's in its infancy stage, I think being backed by someone like News Corp and having the brands of Fox and FX and all these other things, we can bring it to the next level. And he looked at me and goes, "I really like your energy." So I went back to LA. I created a business plan why we should create an online group, and the CFO greenlit it. We created the very first website out of any cable network for FX. And then when I went to Fox, I was in charge of all Fox Online and created the websites for Fox Sports, Fox Entertainment, and at the time, Fox Kids. And that was the biggest game changer in my life, because that all of a sudden people were like, the president of Fox Sports is coming up to me and goes, "Can I ask you a question?" "For sure." He goes, "What's the difference between the web and AOL?" And so those are the questions like people are asking of cryptocurrency today.
Sure.
The online was, I had the executive vice president of sales come up to me and goes, "Nice fake job you created." Like, "What do you mean?" "Well, what are you going to do when the internet disappears like the CB radio?" I said, "I hope you're wrong." And that was, back in 94, 95.
That's very cool, man. No, I love that stuff, right? I still think it's hilarious that people thought the internet wasn't going to be a thing, but at the same time, like, I could see where some people would be skeptical, but it's just funny now because it's basically like everybody, well, not everybody, but so much of the world's population is connected to the internet constantly just through their phone, right? Never mind all the other devices that we connect to.
So much so. I mean, the minute when you, like, your mom says, "Oh, you know what? I missed this show, but it's okay. I can watch it on my iPad." I'm like, "Really, Mom? That's actually really impressive."
Yeah.
So, it's definitely mainstream, and you start to look at the world today, and a lot of people, and even like that first iteration, like I remember when things started going down, when they called it the dot bomb, but a lot of valuations were kind of plummeting. People were all betting on just the fact that a website had 1 billion, users. No one had figured out how to monetize it yet. And so all these stocks plummeted, and a lot of people thought the internet was, maybe this was its demise. But out of that emerged, Amazon and eBay and all these things where they started to figure out, how do we utilize this technology and this medium, and kind of paved the way for Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, and all these things, which is where it's an interesting time in entertainment, where we used to call the big three ABC, CBS, NBC, and I think the big three now are Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon, because
Sure.
That's where the most coolest alternative programming is being done, and it's a really amazing time to be a content producer.
Sure. So you moved on from Fox. Walk me through kind of the rest of your history, because it's actually really cool. You've done you did some incredible stuff at those networks, but you've done some cool stuff between kind of then and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So from Fox, all of a sudden now, everyone's saying, okay, so this is a real deal. So my business card was looking good, my resume. So I was able to start to move from the next studio to the next. So Universal had just launched the Universal New Media Group.
Right.
And, that was a playground I really wanted to play in. So I started to stalk the president of the New Media Group, and he wouldn't return my phone calls for some reason. But I was talking to his assistant, and I remember she said to me, I leave at 6:30, and he stays here till about 8. So if you call after 6:30, he usually answers his own phone. So I finally got hold of him, and it's like you just hear him kind of go, "I've gotten your calls. Why don't you fax me your resume?" I'm like, "I can email it." He's like, "Just fax it." I'm like, okay. And I think as the part of that, he finally set me up with a few meetings. They ended up hiring me as a consultant, and then I helped launch the very first online store through e-commerce, working with Microsoft for Universal. And then as a result of that, they ended up hiring me full-time to run biz dev and content. And that got really interesting, because so now all of a sudden I'm back in, and now I started to realize it was more than just doing websites. How can we now generate revenue through this medium? So from there, I had some success. Then I got a call back from News Corp, and part of it was that they had, Murdoch and Chaim Saban had decided to go in on the Family Channel, owned by Pat Robertson, and they were going to do this merge, and they were going to call it Fox Family Channel, which at the time some people were calling the kind of a foxymoron. How do you put Fox and family in the same sentence? But they did a really great job. And so at that point, another game changer, I would say, is when they hired our president, which his name was Rich Cronin, who came from Viacom, who helped create Nick at Night. And so my task there was to, build, entertainment for online through, the Fox Family website and revamp Fox Kids. And at that point, we started doing some really cool things where like candy companies were coming saying, "Hey, we want to do an ad buy." And I said, well, I think we could do more than just put a banner on a website. And we started creating like what I was calling advergaming. And we started doing like games that we would build the engine. And then as a result of that, we could reskin it. So we started creating revenue through that kind of advertainment. And that was really a big moment for me, because that started changing things. I started looking at the medium for more than just a website, which then led us to saying, how can we then take what we do and impact television? So we started looking at creating an interactive television task force. So, we did a lot of really cool stuff while I was there, became very good friends with Rich Cronin. And I left there after a few years because I got a call from Paul Allen.
Okay, sure.
Company, Vulcan. And that's a call you don't turn down.
Sure.
And Paul was trying to do something that, again, I'd been experiencing, which was he wanted to launch a bunch of digital cable networks that were based on really niche areas that he was passionate about. So, for example, he wanted to launch a musician channel, not a music channel, but a channel for musicians.
Sure.
He wanted to launch a guy channel. He wanted to launch a health and wellness channel, because he realized that the digital spectrum, in his ownership in RCN and Charter, he would be able to get distribution. And he thought it was a really great thought. But unfortunately, at the time, the people around him weren't big fans of that idea. He had lost, during the dot bomb, he went from $50 billion to about $25 billion. Now, we still have $25 billion.
Sure.
But it just set everybody in a little bit of a panic, like, maybe we should just kind of pull back a little here. So it was kind of like, we were doing lots of business plans, but nothing was ever the trigger was never being pulled. And after a while, you can only do so much, and not realize that we're probably not going to get anything launched here. And that's when Rich Cronin called me again and said, listen, Liberty Media just bought half of Game Show Network from Sony. I think it's a great opportunity to finally realize what we can do in the world of interactive television. Because if you can't make a game show interactive, what are you going to do?
Yeah, fair, right? Yeah, interesting.
And he said, so what are your thoughts on that? I said, well, first of all, I'm obsessed with game shows. I've loved them since I was a kid. I will absolutely come over and join you there. And the next 7 years of that was probably some of the highlights of my career, because that was when the Television Academy decided to make interactive television, a category in the Emmys. And
Sure.
So we were nominated for an Emmy 4 years in a row.
Wow.
I'm kind of the Susan Lucci of the Emmys, because I never won, but being nominated is just as nice, they say. But we did everything from websites, online games, interactive television, where people, again, at home are sitting there playing along with their television. And this is before we had the smartphone or the iPads. And so you're really counting on a lot of people having their desktop or laptop in the same room, but it was working. And at that point, we even started making commercials interactive. So we'd be like, you're playing along live with other players, but during the commercials, don't walk away because we're going to ask you questions about the commercial for extra points.
Okay.
So not only we're giving prizes, we're putting the leaders on television. Advertisers started really taking notice of this. It was a really great time to be doing things like that. And it was really one of those moments where I'm like, we're kind of onto something here. We worked with some of the cable operators. We did our first one-screen interactivity, so you could actually play along with a remote control. We did that out of Oceanic Time Warner in Hawaii, so that didn't suck having to go to Hawaii a couple times a month. and it was just a really cool time being able to be part of that. And that's, again, back to entertainment, but we're doing things that no one had ever done before. And then the little fun stuff we were doing, too, was we were looking at the whole, viral online game area. And there was a time when, Mel Gibson had gotten into that drunken tirade on the PCH. And I was jokingly saying in a meeting, someone did a game on Michael Jackson called Escape from Neverland. I go, we should do something about Mel Gibson. And Cronin goes, how fast could you launch that? I said, well, we have this really cool games company in Toronto that moves really quick and they're, not expensive. We launched the game. It had like 1 million views. I ended up we were interviewed on the news several times, and we realized we have something here because our traffic increased like 1,000% as a result of these games. So we did the Mel Gibson game. We did, a game on OJ. We did one where Paris Hilton going to jail called The Prison Life with Paris Hilton, which got us 5
I
million
remember
plays.
these. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it was like, oh my God, I think we're like every week there's a headline. We did Rosie versus Trump when they were in their fight before he was ever even thought to be president. We did another one that was a lot of when the Missilomaniac for North Korea, when his dad was still alive. And there was a lot of those types of things that we were doing that were relevant. We said, we're game show network, but we also were game. So we were feeling like that felt part of the brand and it helped. So there was 7 years of just utter fun to be able to be in the medium and doing things that were like a big sandbox that we could play in.
Sure.
And then around then, that's when Rich left and they decided to make changes. And after 7 years, it was probably time. And then I had a really amazing call from a recruiter that was just like a dream job, which was to go work for George Lucas at Lucasfilm. And that to me, I remember talking to my wife that it was going to be, in San Francisco. And we said, well, before we move, we should probably, test the waters and I'll commute to San Francisco. And, that job was one of those things where it's like, do you ever go to a party when there's like 5 minutes left and you go to get a beer and just foam comes out? That was kind of working at Lucasfilm. Like George was done at that point making movies. The live action TV show that was been talked about wasn't going to happen. And I just realized I probably joined Lucasfilm about maybe 6-7 years too late. And, after a year, it was like probably not going to happen. And no one knew that the sale was 2-3 years away. So It was one of those things where it was a interesting time. I loved going to Skywalker Ranch. I loved the whole environment, but it was just, as far as getting things done, that was just unfortunate.
Sure.
But met a lot of great people. And like I said, it was an amazing experience. And then Margaret Lash, who I'd worked with at Fox Kids, had just been given the CEO position for a new joint venture between Discovery and Hasbro to launch a kids network called The Hub.
Okay.
And that was another one of those great opportunities to come back to LA and do a startup network. And that was, again, another fun couple of years. I think Hasbro and Discovery maybe had different goals at the time.
Okay.
Discovery was really amazing at what they do in the cable industry. Hasbro, of course, is the most amazing toy company out there. But I think there was a couple of ideas of how that should be done. So they ended up folding that after a couple of years, and it became Discovery Family again. But then that allowed me to then move on to the next chapter, which was starting to get into the production world.
Okay.
So I worked at Endemol, and then I moved to Bunim Murray, and up until then, I'd really always been on the network side, not necessarily the production side. So after being there and seeing what was going on in the world of, short form, it really opened the eyes to all this alternative distribution out there, which was like everything from, Verizon Go 90 and YouTube and full screen and all these new things that were coming out, it really opened my eyes as to, it kind of went full circle. Like I'd come out here to produce television shows and movies, and now all of a sudden there was this opportunity to be able to do that through these new alternative platforms. And now it's gone full circle. I'm now at a company called Pure Imagination Studios. I'm the chief content officer, and we do everything from, production services. We produce a lot of content for Lego.
Okay.
We just wrapped up Guardians of the Galaxy Lego. We're doing Black Panther. We did the Lego 4D adventure at Legoland. We do location-based entertainment. We just are wrapping up the Aliens VR experience, which is just nothing less than amazing. But my main mandate now is to create original content for both television, film, and digital. And so it's a really amazing time. I'm really excited to be. I've known the founder, Josh Wexler, for 20 plus years when he was over at The Threshold, which produced things like Mortal Kombat, among many other films. And
sure.
Really, really cool guy. And it's a very geeky, nerdy, fun environment that I just love to play in.
No, that's great, man. I love that. I think you've had an incredible journey, and I think kind of what you're doing now at Pure Imagination, and I'm not saying traditional TV and stuff is going away, because I don't think it'll ever go away, but I think kind of what you're doing now is kind of pulling some of that traditional stuff and kind of merging in some of the newer up-and-coming stuff like VR and AI and kind of some of the other stuff that maybe we don't even know yet, right? And then trying to put it on kind of traditional medium and on online and on phones and other devices. But kind of walk me through your thoughts on kind of what's happening in the space right now, because I think we're almost at the beginning of kind of another revolution of kind of tech and animation and TV and media and entertainment kind of all coming together. Is that fair to say?
I agree with you. I completely agree with that. In fact, part of it is all through those learnings. Like, we started seeing, 3D was the big, since we're like, current on CES, about 5-6 years ago at CES, it was all about, 3D.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, okay, people were taking old shows, converting them to 3D. There was a 3D channel had launched. It was like, all the TVs that were coming out were 3D ready and people were buying the goggles. Mm-hmm. It was, and then we kind of went wah, wah, wah. Like it was not necessarily nothing that, and we maybe it was a little gimmicky, but 3D still works in the theaters for the right piece of content. And then, we saw Google do this thing with, this game called Ingress, which was all, AR based. Now, it was an amazing game, but not necessarily well marketed because nobody really knew what it was or how it worked.
Yeah, except for nerds, thing. Right?
Exactly. So I thought it was cool, a self-proclaimed nerd. But unfortunately, it kind of just went away for a second. But then the brilliance of it was it was already mapped out. The technology was already there. And someone said, well, wait a minute. What if we put a well-known brand on top of this and reskinned it, which was Pokemon Go?
Sure.
And all of a sudden, the light bulbs went off for everybody saying, oh, my God, look at this hit we have. There's millions and millions of people worldwide searching for these Pokemon. I would driving down the street, I see hordes of crowds. I'd never seen anything like it.
Totally, yeah.
It was one of those very fast things, but I think it opened everyone's eyes. It's like, oh, here's a brand that's well known. Here's a cool technology, and everyone has a phone in their hand. It started to make a lot of sense as to how this stuff could work. Now, I think AR is one of the most underrated technologies out there. And I know within some of the new phones, it's going to only get bigger. And I think what Magic Leap is doing is going to be amazing. A friend of mine, Rio Caref, is over there, and he's, an amazing guy. So I really have big expectations for what they're doing. And then come VR. Mm-hmm. And to your point, VR, again, I almost for a second was thinking that's going to go in the way of 3D.
Yeah, me too.
Because how many people have goggles? I mean, they're expensive. I have a 5-year-old that's almost 6. I don't necessarily want to see him in the TV room with the goggles on all by himself, just sitting there.
Sure.
But then when I went to Pure Imagination for a meeting one day, they, hey, like, John, do you have some extra time? I said, yeah. They brought me into this set and they kind of backed me into it. They put the goggles on me. They put some stuff on my arms and they said, you're just woken up from a cryo sleep and you're in a mining colony in space. So when you turn around, that's all we're going to tell you.
Okay, interesting.
So I turn around and I'm like, oh my God. I literally felt like I had been transported somewhere else.
Sure.
Now, I can get a little motion sickness with VR. It's happened.
Sure,
but
me too.
Now I look down, which all can help. And then there was a railing, and I'm like, just for the hell of it, I kind of reached out, and I was able to touch the railing. And I'm like, oh my God. The minute I was able to do that, I felt completely grounded.
Yeah.
So now I had a headset on, so it was giving me instructions saying, go over to get suited up. I'm like, suited up? And next thing you know, I'm getting suited up. Then it tells me to go to weapons training, and there was this plasma blaster rifle sitting in front of me. I'm like, no way. And I go lean over, and I was able to pick it up and
That's
actually
awesome.
shoot it. I got on an elevator that felt like it was going down, and as I looked down and seeing the lava, it started getting hotter as I'm going down. And so then I realized it's location-based entertainment. So VR being a location-based experience. And what I found out later on, like as I took the mask off, is they had built this entire set that worked within this environment. And now I think with VR, you're like with what's going on with us, what's going on with people like The Void or 2-Bit Circus. I mean, there's VR parks in China and Japan.
Yep.
I really think that this is kind of going in the ways of the Dave and Buster on steroids. And that's something that Pure Imagination is doing. And I do think that that's where some of this technology is going to really help grow this type of area. And like you said, I think brands matter. So we're working with a lot of brands like Aliens and other ones that will, Star Wars just launched their Star Wars experience over in Orange County, and apparently it's the real deal. It's like you feel like you're literally part of the Rebel Alliance. It's supposed to be amazing.
That's really cool. Yeah, I 100% agree. Like a few years ago, we got the development Oculus kit, and I remember trying it and just walking around one of their demo towns, I was I got the motion sickness, right? And I kind of thought, right. And I know they were working on it and it was pre-release, and I'm not really trying to bash them, but I was kind of they need to fix this, and yeah, it's okay, but I don't know, this will probably go the way of the 3D television. And to your point, a few minutes ago, there's so much cool content where you can interact with stuff, and there sometimes when I don't know if you guys are doing it, and tell me if you are or not, but doing stuff with smells and a bunch of stuff as well, so you very much feel you're there, and they've sorted out the refresh rate or whatever it is, so you, for the 100%. Most part, they don't get sick, you don't get that motion sickness anymore, right?
That's exactly right. And we have one of the things that we did for Formula One racing. You get in one of these cars, you feel the wind on your face. People that get out of this car have to sit for a bit because their knuckles are white. They literally felt like they just got off the racetrack. The small of their back is wet from sweat, from just the adrenaline. And that to me is the experience. Our CEO, Josh Wexler, he was in Japan for some meetings, and he took some time off to just do one of the VR parks. And he said, there's Mario Kart, amazing brands and great experiences. But some of the most simplest experiences were crazy. There's one called Walk the Plank. Okay. And you literally are on this maybe 4-inch, 5-inch plank. Okay. And you're not up in the air, but you put the goggles on, you're 100 stories up. The plank is maybe 3 inches off the ground. So if you put your foot just on the out, you don't feel the ground. So you now feel like you're up in the air. Interesting. You feel the wind, and your goal is to walk the plank at the end to rescue a kitten. Okay. And you hear the ambience of the sounds, the winds. He said, because my legs were actually shaking because my brain just wouldn't rationalize it. I really wasn't up there. Interesting. And those are those moments where you can do these things. So, I know that I think someone that did the movie Walk the Line, it was that same type of thing where you're on a tightrope. You knew you're not up in the air. I did this experience where, again, I was up in the air on a building and firing, I had these kind of an Iron Man blasters, And at the very end, after you finish your mission, a ship comes to get you, and it's a transport ship, and you actually just had to jump 2 feet from the building onto the transport ship. And I remember going, oh my God, I got to jump, and I'm looking down, I'm like 100 stories up. And I did the jump, and when I took the stuff off, they go, you realize that only 20% of the people are willing to make that jump, and the 80% say, I'm okay.
Interesting.
And in our aliens experience, I walked a lot of people through it, and the elevator scene, which is where one of the aliens shows up, and I won't take it away from people that want to go. Like, I had some people just scream and take the mask off and go, I'm done. I get it. So, it's those moments that you can, a friend of mine used to talk about GoPro and said that, they used GoPro to say that it was an experience transfer. And I think that that's where location-based VR can transfer you through an experience that you could not get elsewhere.
Sure.
And that's what makes that thing so compelling, because it's still entertainment and there's still storytelling to it. And that's what makes that, to me, as long as you make it a compelling experience, that's why that will continue to succeed.
No, I 100% agree, man. It's actually really interesting. And I think we're kind of at the beginning of it, right? Like, it's only going to get better, and it's really good now.
Exactly. And now when you take the cumbersome goggles, like, I'm not trying to toot our own horn, but, one of the things that we do is everything's wireless. We don't have any backpacks. You're not tethered. You're completely free. And that's made a lot of difference for people, because when you have the backpack on, you still in the back of your mind, that you're part of this VR. So when you have less on you, it becomes a little bit more realistic. So imagine when those goggles become less cumbersome, and that it becomes, it's actually, fingers crossed, you almost realize it's like the Star Trek holodeck, where eventually will you even need goggles. So it's just interesting time to see where that could potentially all go. But that's far in the future. So you got to realize what we have now. And, it goes back to like something you said earlier about just the fact that through technology and even alternative distribution, I mean, we talk about, some of these mergers and acquisitions that are happening. Like, what does that do for storytellers? I was on a panel once where we were talking to, you and I talked about this in a previous meeting, where somebody was talking about, content is king. Content is king. And I remember saying, yeah, you know what? I agree with that, but don't forget about the queen. And the queen is distribution.
Sure.
And don't forget about, if you have a king and a queen, that means you have a kingdom, and the subjects are your audience. So it's those three things that no matter what it is, whether it's AR, VR, a TV show, a movie, you got to make sure that the content that you're creating, you need to know where it's going to be distributed or shown and who that audience is. So you're creating a VR experience, you got to know who you're doing it for and where that's going to live. So if it's location-based, is it the right place where you're putting it? Some of the people that are building, VR for the home, just remember, you got to think about, well, what's that experience going to be like by yourself? What we're doing is kind of multiplayer. So people that are playing the Aliens game, you and I could go in together and help each other as we're shooting up the aliens or trying to survive. It's that type of experiential type thing that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point. As much as I'm sure a lot of people would love maybe a dedicated VR or gaming space or whatever, for some people, that's just not realistic, right? But when you're creating that content, you need to think about how much room does this really take up in somebody's house, right? Where if you're building these things out in the public that people can go to, then you have a lot more freedom to do probably a lot cooler stuff, at least at this point.
Exactly right. And, some of the things that we're experimenting with is, as we build these experiences, and if we're going to have a location to do those, the sets that you build, can we then manipulate them so that maybe you're going through the aliens experience, and then if you're going to do something else, a quick move of the set and this and that can turn it into another experience. So they become multi-usable sets for different experiences depending on how you're going about it. Because that's really what it comes down to, is also being cost efficient. Like, how much does this cost to produce? So what is that price point, so that someone that's coming in and experiencing it, are you making it worth, if it's, whether it's, I think Star Wars is $25 or $30, it might be less or more.
Sure.
What's the value prop on that fee? Did you give them an experience that was so cool that they might be willing to put another 20 or 25 down to do that.
Sure.
And I think that's what we saw in Japan, is that they have like the different experiences, and they come into 3 levels. Like, let's just call it, I think they're using colors, the yellow, blue, red.
Okay.
Where the red is like, a $50 experience, and the yellow is maybe a $20 experience. So, you got to make the experience worth the dollar. So the $50 experience might be, 10 to 15 minutes on Mario Kart, and you're really experiencing something incredibly compelling. And the smaller one might be just walk the plank because it's simplistic, but it's still a cool experience.
Interesting.
But
yeah.
That's going to be something experiment.
Yeah, no, that's actually really interesting. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on kind of like augmented reality, because I know like Apple demoed it not that long ago, and I have a Pixel phone, so I've been playing with Google's kind of AR stickers, and I get that's like very, very early on. I haven't actually played with any of the headsets that do kind of AR yet. But have you, and are you guys doing some stuff in the AR space?
We're starting to experiment with it, absolutely, because that is one of the things that we know those two working together are going to be the big things. And that's what we talked about eventually, when we won't need those goggles. And even like, when you think about when like Google did Google Glass and Snapchat and all these types of things, and when you start to realize with AR, you could be looking at things that not only are, entertainment based, but also functional about, walking through and getting to do face recognition and types of things that are going to be very, sci-fi driven in the ways of what we see in movies, even through advertising. And if it gets to know you, if you have AR, just the fact that I was walking through the conference at CES and my phone was literally I was getting messaging by walking by a booth. Instead of a person telling me to stop, like I was getting messages on my phone that knew I was in that. And then you take AR and put that on top of it, it could really change a lot. So I think AR, especially, I don't know if you've been following what, Magic Leap is doing, but I really do believe that AR is truly, again, that's that low-hanging fruit. So we're looking at it from an entertainment perspective. I still think after watching the early days of, Pokemon Go, just the fact that, treasure hunts, scavenger hunts, and interactivity with things that are going on, it's educational in museums. I think that it's just an amazing technology, and we just have to figure out how you can monetize that through these types of things. I had one guy had an idea that was pitched to me that I'm under an NDA on it, but just the way utilizing billboards in AR, I was just like, the pitch was so compelling, but to monetize it, you'd have to probably get advertisers on board. And that's going to be another thing that we have to think about is, the economics and the return on investments on these things. Like we know with VR location-based stuff, you can charge for it.
Sure.
AR, you got to start figuring out, like, Pokemon Go was a no-brainer because you could start there's in-app purchases and stuff like that. But when you build out these big things, it's going to be really, someone's going to come up with something that's going to make it become that no-brainer, and then it's going to really open up the gamut even more so. But I do think that AR is really one of those things that's literally right in front of us. Everybody, instead of everybody having a VR headset, everybody has a smartphone.
Yeah.
And everybody has the capability of doing AR. So you can really appeal to the masses. And I think that that's a big responsibility to create something that's so compelling that's good for the industry.
No, that's actually really interesting. And I kind of want your kind of thoughts and opinions. And I think I know where you're going to go with this, but like, you guys did some stuff for Plants vs. Zombies and Angry Birds, and I think the point I'm trying to get across is like both of those concepts, and I don't even mean it mean because I think what they did was actually brilliant, but like how the game mechanics and whatnot, like put that all aside, but like the concept between both of those games when they first launched a long time ago, similar to your point with that Google experience. Oh, the name escapes me. What was that thing we were talking about a little while ago?
Oh, Ingress.
Yeah, Ingress. Yeah, like basically, like, and it's the same with kind of like Plants vs. Zombies and Angry Birds. Like the original versions of this stuff were kind of like nerdy versions of it, and I love those versions. But like somebody was smart enough to say like, let's put cute little characters and make a really cool, compelling kind of graphics and content and release these, and they were like insanely successful things, right? And they've grown into these kind of massive companies just around kind of releasing. They didn't come up with these brand new concepts, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, a lot of successful companies haven't done that. But like, so I think the point I'm trying to get across is like, there's a lot of stuff that's been done that if you just kind of put more of like a common angle around it, almost like what Pokemon Go did to Ingress, you can make a lot of money and appeal to the masses, where I think a lot of people don't think like that sometimes. Is that fair to say?
Well, it's funny. It's really funny you say that, because I think what you're talking about with Angry Birds was the original game that
for the iPad
people were saying,
phone,
Crush the Castle, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And that was really, and Angry Birds, they said that's, and I'm going to bring up Angry Birds because, again, we didn't launch the game, but we did an attraction that Rovio hired us for a theme park.
Yeah.
And with Angry Birds, I was literally working at the hub. So I mentioned that the Hasbro Discovery Network.
Yeah.
And Angry Birds had just come out. I knew the game Crush the Castle, but I started playing the game because I liked Crush the Castle. I'm like,
sure.
Wow, talk about taking an engine like you just said, but now what they did was they created a story around it.
Yeah.
And I liked the story so much so that I contacted Rovio and said, hey, we should do an animated series based on this whole thing.
Interesting.
Is there any interest? And they were like, maybe, like enough for me to then go to our CEO. And I do the pitch. I said, here's an idea. I said, we should do Angry Birds, the animated series. It's based on what I think is going to be a really popular app. And she looked at me and said, why are the birds so angry? I kind of like, sarcastic. I go, well, and I go, okay, fair enough. I go, let me give you the pitch. The idea is that, there's these birds, okay? And there's these pigs of the kingdom that keep stealing the birds' eggs. But the birds are kind of like the X-Men of birds. They each have their own individual powers, but when they work together, they destroy the pigs and get the eggs back, and it just keeps coming back. It's like Tom versus Jerry. It's like Spy versus Spy, the Hatfield McCoys. And she looked at me and said, John, you are such a geek. And I said, you know what? I might be a geek, but you pay me money to be that geek, so we really should think about it. So they passed. And a couple of years later, when whatever the valuation of Rovio was that day, she walked in my office and said, so what else you got? I'm like, well, it doesn't happen every day, but you got to be ready for when those things trend. So, again, Angry Birds did amazingly well, Plants vs. Zombies. But, again, the schematics has always been there. Yeah. But when you add characters, brands, and stories, that's what the big difference is. And I think that's really what you've got to be smart about as you look into entertainment. Like, even when I'm looking now as far as original content for whether it's television, film, or digital, it's still important to look at, original IP can be amazing, but you really don't sometimes get the opportunity to do the original stuff until you really have had a track record or people that can trust you.
Sure.
Like, it's like, sometimes you're better off saying, like, let's go get the rights to this brand and bring life to it and then show what you got. I always like to tell the story about, Judd Apatow. Judd Apatow did Freaks and Geeks, and he had a pile of scripts that he couldn't sell. But then all of a sudden, 40-Year-Old Virgin came out with Steve Carell, which was a huge hit.
Sure.
And then after that, you saw a movie come out from Judd Apatow like every 3 months. But it was all the scripts that he had already written, because now they were giving him the attention.
Sure.
And he was able to get all the original IP out.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I just look at that from that perspective, saying, looking for original content is great, something that you've never seen before, but it also I always like to be aware of, like, well, what brands are out there that haven't been exploited in other mediums that could still be a fantastic story that hasn't been told yet on this canvas.
Sure, and you guys have done a lot of really cool stuff for a lot of big brands that I think pretty much everybody's heard of, like the Lego Movie, The Simpsons, the Justice League. I didn't see that the other day when I was looking. So you guys have been doing some really cool stuff, right? With Plants vs. Zombies and,
Yeah, the Justice League, we launched the Justice League ride. We did all the media for that. It's Six Flags Magic Mountain over the summer.
Sure.
One of my favorite things again, this is prior to me joining, but I love the story there. I don't know if you remember the Cars 3 trailer.
Yeah.
Out. It was a really dark trailer. It was like, it shows a racetrack. It shows the crash. you see, Lightning McQueen parts all over the track, and it says, "Life will never be the same." And you're like, "Oh my God, did Lightning McQueen die?" And it's like really dark. And I don't think it was very well received. So we ended up being able to work with DreamWorks on redoing the trailer, and we gave a few scenarios, and one of them was, why don't we do the trailer exactly frame by frame the way you did it, but we'll do it with Legos.
Very cool.
And so it was Lightning McQueen. You tell the same trailer, and in the end, it shows Lightning McQueen hanging behind a green screen saying, "All right, cut, let's break for lunch." And he goes, "Hey, a little help? Someone let me down?" And that appeared in the theater. So it was those types of things that it was a story retold, even though through a movie trailer. So it's a lot of fun stuff that we get to do. It's never boring.
No, that's great, man. And sadly, we're coming to the very end of the show, but I really want to talk about kind of your involvement with the Media Excellence Award. So how did you kind of get involved, and why do you think it's important?
So I was this is back to the Hub days. I was meeting with somebody, and they were looking for a couple presenters, several presenters for the Media Excellence Awards, and someone said, "Hey, would you like to present an award?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And I came to the show. I'd never met Sarah Miller before, who's the founder and CEO.
Right.
And I presented. I watched the show, and it was amazing. It was very compelling. There's a lot of amazing people there, but I think I said to Sarah, I thought the show went a little long. I said, we should get together and talk. And when we got together, I said, you seem like you put so much work into this. How do you get it all done with one person? She's like, "Well, it's what I do." I said, you should have a board an advisory board. People can help you. She's like, "You want to be on it?" I said, "Okay." And next thing is, she put together this amazing team that we've all gotten to know each other, and she literally got us all motivated to be part of it. And what I like about it, and Sarah's she's like the pit bull of this industry. She just goes for it and never stops and keeps it relevant because mobile has evolved.
Sure.
It's all, from what she told me, it stems from what she used to do called Mobile Mondays. It was just a get together and people would talk, and then she said, "You know what, there's a lot of compelling content out there. We should showcase it and let people see it." And then one of our recent board meetings where we were talking, and she said, "It's not all about mobile anymore, because you could argue that everything's mobile.
Yeah.
It's really about media. There's so much content that uses, whether it's an iPad or a phone or a computer or whatever, you could argue that everything's now mobile. It's just another platform, and we should really focus on media because it opens up the gamut." And that's what happened. And I think that what's amazing about it is it does showcase people that are being incredibly innovative and out there trying to change things. It's just about everything you and I have talked about, whether it's, VR is part of it this year. In fact, one of our anchor sponsors is Star VR. And, you wouldn't have seen that. That was even like on the horizon 3 or 4 years ago.
Sure.
We wouldn't even thought about that. So the fact that, technology and media continues to evolve, as has this award show, I think it's pretty amazing. And here we are at the 10th anniversary. So, kudos to Sarah Miller for keeping it alive and never giving up on it. And I think that, again, our team, I think you've talked to John Ruby and Daniel Tibbetts and Scott Holmes and the whole gang.
Yeah, and I had Brooks on from Star VR or Sundry Studios. Yeah.
Yeah, Brooks is one of my, he's one of the guys I worked with at Lucasfilm.
Oh, very cool.
So I helped convince him to get out to LA. So really one of the good guys too. So yeah, I think that's where it's going to continue to grow, and looking forward to the show. I'll be presenting once again.
Well, John, that's great. But let's close the show with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself and Pure Imagination Studios.
Sure, I'm on Twitter at JPR333. I need to tweet more, but I've been so insanely busy over the last 6 months. I'm going to get more into that.
Sure.
You can check us out. Our website's pistudios.com.
Yeah.
So you can see some of the work we've done, and we'll continue to be building out that brand. And that should do it. I'm looking forward to meeting you or eventually face to face, and you should come over for the VR experience for Aliens. For those that can't come to the studio, we'll be launching that over in Orange County, across from Disneyland, probably in mid-February.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, no, that's great, man. And yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting you on January 18th at the Media Awards. And if people want more information about that, they can go to mediaxawards.com. But again, John, thanks again for taking the time out of your day to be on the show. And I look forward to keeping in touch with you and meeting you in person, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks, man. We'll talk soon. Okay, bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit the show's website at buildingthefutureshow.com. Also check us out on Facebook at Building the Future Show, and follow us on Twitter at Building Show. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com, and keep building the future.